All right, Laura, thanks so much for doing this. My first question that I have for you is tell the audience, just a little bit about yourself and how you started in the mental health space.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Laura Patino and I'm an LPC here in Oregon. I guess a little bit about how I got started. I think becoming a therapist is something that for a really long time I knew that I wanted to do and I thought it would be meaningful to me. I had a previous career in the music industry, and then over time I kind of just segued over into the mental health world, like working with the National Eating Disorder Association and things like that. And then eventually found my way to grad school. And then, yeah, I've been in private practice a couple of years now and mostly focus on sexuality, relationships, and OCD. So that's kind of the short, brief version of how I found myself here.
Mm-hmm. And were there any mentors that you sort of looked up to that said, I want to be, what you are today?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's see. I think I had some therapists early in kind of my adolescence or college years where they really helped kind of guide me through some harder times, or maybe like gave me some language or ways of viewing things that I didn't have then. And that was just so helpful to me at the time. It gave me a lot of tools. And so I thought that would be really awesome if I was able to kind of provide the same thing for some other people. And then, yeah, especially along the way, my main supervisor leading up to my licensure, her name's Angela Gilchrist Stewart. She was like a huge mentor, just kind of like guiding person in my life.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about the work that you do as a psychologist. You mentioned that to me a minute ago, but could you unpack that?
Yeah, totally. So I'm a licensed professional counselor, which is similar to psychologist, but just kind of different educational paths there. Let's see. I started, especially out of grad school, I focused more on relationship counseling and sex therapy. A lot of times that just focuses more on people who are having like specific sexual concerns. And then over time, I've really found a lot of passion towards working with people with OCD, especially, and that includes anxiety for sure. But I myself deal with OCD, so I think that's been like especially meaningful to just be able to connect with people who maybe have a shared experience, or we kind of like speak the same language. And then I've definitely found some overlap as far as people dealing with like relationship concerns and then OCD at the same time. So that's kind of like where I've found my niche this far.
Hmm. So how do you sort of help folks, who are struggling with, like you said, OCD and sort of relationship issues? What goes on the therapy room?
Yeah, absolutely. If there is kind of a relationship component to some of the obsessions or some of the concerns, I'll definitely tap a lot into attachment or maybe like early traumatic experiences, just experiences in general with relationships that maybe impacted like our beliefs about them, or maybe ways that we feel like we need to protect ourselves when we're navigating interpersonal situations. So that one can be like a little more narrative or flexible as far as how we approach it. And then as far as OCD goes, there's a couple different approaches that I'll integrate. One of them is called ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. And that one focuses more on just kind of finding the things in our life that we're in control of, that we're not in control of, where we can kind of like gain more acceptance. And then also, yeah, what are our values and how can we kind of live a life that's in alignment with our values? So, yeah, we might not always be able to control the thoughts that we're having, but how do we maybe just like find a better relationship with those thoughts and still kind of live the life that we want to live at the same time? And then the other approach is ERP, exposure and response prevention. And that's I don't know if you've ever seen in movies or something, the kind of like classic exposure therapy stuff where, if somebody's I feel like in movies it's always portrayed very like dramatically or something. If somebody's scared of like contamination, there's probably a scene where they make somebody, kind of like go through garbage, and it's never going to be like super dramatic or supposed to cause a bunch of distress, but we find basically like little manageable ways to create some exposure around things that we fear. And the whole idea is that the more that we get kind of that practical experience with stuff we're scared of, the more our brain realizes, oh, the catastrophe outcome that we were scared of didn't happen, and it's not something that we need to maybe give as much pressure to. So yeah, if that overlaps with relationships, it might be kind of like exposures around it being okay if we experience guilt, or we set boundaries with people, or we don't always check on people's safety, or if the attachment in the relationship is safe. That's usually kind of the overlap of those two worlds when they do combine.
Mm-hmm. Which one, if you had to pick one, is your favorite?
Oh, okay. That's so tough. I feel these days I really love both of them, but I especially love working with my OCD clients. Yeah, I think just sometimes it can be kind of an isolating experience, and I guess kind of a common thing I've heard is that people with OCD, they'll find that like a lot of therapists maybe don't understand the experience, or they might, not on purpose, but inadvertently end up making it worse. And so sometimes I feel like there's just kind of like a kindred spirit thing working with the OCD population these days.
And how important is it for therapists to sort of understand, what patients are going through, particularly those with OCD? Because you just disclosed a minute ago that you also experience OCD. So how important is it to establish that sort of connection, that sense of like, I hear you, I see you, I understand you?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that like you need to personally deal with something to be able to like effectively treat it, or have therapy go well, but I think it makes a huge difference when you're able to empathize. And there is kind of like a gray area where if it's something that you also struggle with yourself, you really, yeah, have to make sure that you're kind of not having any of your own stuff show up in the room, or that outside of your time as a therapist, you're really making sure to kind of like take care of yourself and that sort of thing. But I think, yeah, it's huge. It's like a lot of the research shows that rather than like a specific modality, the most important thing is just that there's a sense of rapport and genuine care in the relationship. So if that means, yeah, you guys have a shared experience or not, as long as there's a way that, you know, there's this like real sense of care and authenticity happening in the relationship, then that's like the biggest factor.
Mm-hmm. And what have you learned in doing this kind of work? Well, when you're working with clients with OCD, like what's some of your biggest takeaways in terms of like the growth and evolution and how they've been able to grow themselves as individuals?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, yeah, some of the biggest takeaways are that people are a lot stronger than they think they are. And it's usually only in that kind of like avoidance where we're scared to try new things or face things that we're concerned about. That's where the self-doubt starts to kick in. And it's like once people kind of like give themselves a chance, um, yeah, I think we realize how strong and resilient we are. And so I think that's kind of been the main thing. Is it's really awesome to see people like give themselves a chance to do something that's scary and kind of make those little leaps, and then over time start to make bigger and bigger leaps. So that's like one of the coolest parts about it.
Mm-hmm. My next question is, what's on your bucket list in terms of like learning something new? I know that you mentioned that you specialize in exposure response prevention and OCD, but is there like another area that you want to dip your toes into?
Totally. Yeah, I do want to keep getting kind of more and more education around OCD treatment in general. The more kind of specialized I can become there, the better. But then outside of that, I'm planning to go on a maternity leave pretty soon, which is exciting. But I think when I get back from that, an area I'm really interested in is autism spectrum disorder, becoming somebody who's able to do assessments for that and advocate for clients to yeah, help get whatever accommodations they need in that area. So I have a colleague who kind of like put me in touch with like a good training in that direction. So I think that's my next area. And I that's something I've also found too is that like the typical OCD treatments, I don't feel like they always include people on the spectrum or that they really take into account how people on the spectrum might just respond to things differently, view things differently, and that's kind of been an area where I've consistently felt like, wow, I really want to be able to help people get better results, like when they deal with autism and OCD at the same time. So yeah, I think that's kind of my next step once I get back from my leave.
Mm-hmm. And finally, to wrap this up, what sorts of tips or advice would you give to students who are wanting to enter the health field to maybe study OCD and sort of what goes into that?
Yeah, let's see. Getting into the field itself, I feel like this one comes up a lot when I chat with people about it, is just if you can do a little like soul searching about where you want to end up location wise, that's really helpful since we don't have like a national board. It's all like state boards. So you can kind of find yourself in a pickle if you realize you need to like switch states partway through either like your education or your licensure track. So that's kind of like the first thing is just if you can try to be rooted as much as possible before you start going down the path. And then with the OCD work, I think it's something, at least in my experience, that it's like you really have to like advocate for it yourself and seek out resources on your own time. And I imagine it's like that in a lot of different areas of treatment, but I think especially with OCD, it's something that kind of flies under the radar. It's not maybe gonna just naturally come up in like your education path in a way that really provides a lot of depth. So yeah, just in general, like really have like a lot of initiative for yourself and what you want to do in this world.
Mm-hmm. All righty.